AskGunQuestions.com is a website that we built back in 2007, and since then, for the last 15 years, people have been able to ask questions of simple to advanced nature, and we attempt to answer them in different ways over the years. Join us now as we start a new series to answer gun questions.
And welcome everybody to our Saturday edition, well, our weekly edition of the Ask Gun Questions project. And I guess this should be a scrolling banner. So you go into StreamYard and you edit it and you click that button and save it and then click it and then we'll get back to business. So that takes less room on the screen and moves. We've got Clover joining us from Texas. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, good to be here.
And I've also thanks for joining. And then I've got, I invite Tony from New Jersey and Dan from Phoenix area. I'm down here in Tucson, Arizona, and we'll get started. I was just going to flip on my camera real quick. Brag about an Instagram post I just posted over there. 3D printed the J.M. Davis Museum. Nobody's done that before, I don't think.
Nice.
And figured out that by doing it this way, you get some. That was unintentional, but you get some lights. I'm going to get rid of the X's in here so you don't see that stuff, but that comes out pretty neat. They set that up somewhere. So that came out kind of neat. And then this is the 45th Infantry Division Museum in Oklahoma City, which I think is not coming in good with the lighting in here, but this is one of the more interesting looking museums. It's an old, I want to say 1900s era initial militia act type of structure, that brick and wood and everything's kind of cool. And then if this was in scale, all outside is static displays of aviation and vehicles and stuff. So really cool museum to look at. J.M. Davis, another one in Tulsa is I'm thinking about doing a 3D print of the place where Wanamaker is with the little dude in front. That'd be pretty neat. Dragon Man's, of course, but I just posted an Instagram post. If y'all have ideas for other firearms museums to print, let me know. I mean, I'll be printing them all, but if you have any idea what order to print them in. Anyway, we'll get back to the show here. Just got the 45th Infantry Museum one just came off the printer earlier, so I'm still fiddling with it. All right, so on Saturdays, we answer gun questions. Those questions come into a website called AskGunQuestions.com. Let's see. There's the picture of the 45th Infantry Division Museum. I guess I can close this out. But there's all those static displays out front. And there it is in Oklahoma City. And we'll close that. And then we'll jump over to the database, a list of questions that have come in over the years. I guess this database is from 2017. So there's something like 700-ish questions in here almost. But we've addressed the questions that come in from the website different ways over the years. And our goal now is to have experienced gun owners join in and address questions from our perspectives, our experience and our perspective. Right. So we got a bunch. Clover, do you want to go from like the end of the ones we've already hit, or should we start with the most recent and go backwards towards that where we left off?
Let's start with the most recent, I guess.
I just noticed that Ghost is out there, said that been to that museum in Oklahoma City, 45th Infantry Division Museum. It's pretty awesome. I was thinking about it as I was waiting for it to print, that it's not the biggest museum and it's not the fanciest or nothing, but it's authentic because it just showed you it's in an old probably artillery building. I don't really remember, or infantry, right? But it was like their vehicles or their stables or something probably in the day. But then, so that part of it is cool, but you go in there and it's arranged by campaigns. Keeping in mind, it's an individual's collection, 600 and something guns, almost 700 guns, donated them to the 45th Infantry Division to be the stewards of it. And they picked that museum that they already had, I guess, to be the place to put it. They arranged it in campaigns. So you go through and you see all the different firearms from our side, the United States, in all these different battles and campaigns. And often the little ones are forgotten. And a hell of a lot of people put a lot of effort into those small campaigns that don't get the glory or the awareness of the world wars and things like that. So that part of that museum is really cool. I'm sure the larger museums do the same thing, but it's so intimate and it's so small. Like, I don't mean small in like not complete way, but you can walk through the museum without having to get worn out or anything. You don't. There are places to sit down, but it's not a huge physical effort to walk through the museum. Really lets you appreciate the extract. It's like sipping a fine aged something that you'd like to drink that's aged. It's just like you get the extract of all of everything without all the extra stuff that maybe a classroom of kids would need, or like a real researcher might need, more authentic or more specimen pieces or something like that. This is a really good museum if you just want to contemplate everything that the country has done. So great museum. Anyway, without getting into that, can my Sig, this one came in from James, can my Sig Sauer 226 Navy SEAL version shoot plus P ammo? If not, how many grain 9mm bullets can it safely shoot? So you want to take a stab at that one?
I don't understand the second part.
Well, I don't think they understand terminology, or they're just, you know what I mean? Like they're learning
Yeah.
the terminology or the phrasing, but
Yeah. So
basically the Sig Sauer is a model P226.
right.
And then if not, like he's asking about, or they're asking about plus P, yeah, how many grain 9mm? So I'm guessing like what power, I guess, 9mm. I mean, you want to take a second riff about bullets and how you read calibers and what all those numbers mean and why we're debating, because not all 9mm is the same.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will call a cartridge a bullet, and a cartridge is comprised of multiple things. Modern cartridge ammunition is the projectile, which is technically the correct terminology for a bullet, not the whole thing. But you got you got the projectile, you got the powder. That's what burns and creates the gases to send the projectile down the barrel. You've got the primer in the back, which is what sets everything into motion. It sets that powder off, and then everything is contained in a cartridge case, or what's referred to as the brass. So when you see 9mm, 115 grain, 124 grain, 127 grain, that's the weight of the projectile in the end. So maybe that's what they're talking about with
I
that.
think so. And it could be confusing because people will say like grains
Yeah.
of black powder or how many grains of smokeless. Well, nobody really says that, but it can be said, I guess. Or you could be confused, right?
Could be, yeah. And so, well, first of all, I mean, if you ever have even a day's worth of experience in reloading, you're probably going to realize real quick that a 9mm is not even going to. You can't get 115 grains of any kind of powder in a 9mm cartridge. Even some rifle cartridges will only hold 20 or 30 grains. So certainly can't get that much powder in there. So it's referring to the projectile weight. But yeah, when you get into plus P, it doesn't really have so much to do with the weight of the projectile as it has to do with the power factor, the amount of pressure that cartridge generates. And I'm real hesitant to say it has more powder in it. A lot of people, well, plus P is loaded hotter. Well, not really. It could be a combination of a heavier projectile and it's seated deeper in the case and the crimp is a little, you've got all kinds of weird things you can get into with that. But it's just a higher pressured ammunition. And so, as far as the first part of the question, can the 226 handle plus P? Yes. Most modern firearms can handle plus P. And even if in the owner's manual it cautions against it, what they're saying most of all is the regular use of plus P. But I don't know that I know anybody that would go buy plus P is typically defensive stuff, which is going to be even more expensive than your target load stuff, considerably more, sometimes twice as much, if not more. So I don't know why you would shoot plus P ammunition in your things all the time. It doesn't make any sense. So I've never understood that. And just shooting a little bit here and there in the P226, you're going to be fine. So yes is the answer to that question. The second part was how many grains it could go up. You can go 147 grain on up to seismic ammunition makes some pretty crazy projectile weight stuff in 9mm. I think 180 grain or something. And you can shoot that. Now, realize when you change the grain weight of your projectile, 119 to 124 to 147 grain 9mm, your point of impact will change as well. So if you got adjustable sights, you're going to have to adjust those, or you're going to have to learn the holdovers. Whew.
There's a lot to it. So
I
I'm
miss
going to
anything?
say, yeah, well, yeah, there's definitely different, I
Yeah.
don't say miss, but there's angles, right? So
Yeah.
when you're talking at the last part, I'm going to try to go backwards, but I didn't make notes. But, going backwards, when you say point of aim's going to drop, I was going to say when you change the mass of the bullet, you're also going to lose energy downrange, or you're going to change the amount of energy downrange. So if your goal is to hit a piece of paper or a target accurately and with energy to knock over steel, that's different than if your goal is to disperse energy into a target for stoppage of its light. It's doing its thing. So that's or hunting or self-defense, in other words.
Yeah.
So with plus P, I don't really know enough about the shooting sports, but I know there are some sports where you need to have to factor your energy situation. And I guess what I was going to jump into is what Clover said. When people talk about cartridges or bullets and they mean the whole thing, the system of the thing that makes our guns work. Our guns are mechanisms, they're machines, they're not engines. That the gun itself doesn't provide power to the projectile. The projectile provides its own power, and it operates the giant machine in your hand. It doesn't have a battery. The gun doesn't have a battery to operate it. It depends on chemical energy being created and converted into physical energy, or whatever it's called, to make the gun work. So all that stuff has to happen. And the gun's going to take some energy from that round, but the rest of the equation, the rest of the math is a balance. You can't create nothing from nothing. Everything comes into that cartridge and goes out that cartridge. So the case holds some gunpowder, and the primer, I don't know if that's a big factor, but it must be some factor. But there's some amount of space for the gunpowder. There's some amount of place for the bullet. The bullet's going to have to live in the case somewhat because it has to stay together and be reasonable. It can't be super fragile. It can't just barely be touching the bullet. It has to kind of be holding on to the bullet. That takes space. And then that gunpowder takes some kind of, mass. It has space inside of there too. So you've got some physical constraints, and then the rest of it's math. So like Clover was saying at the end there, if you put a smaller bullet in weight-wise, that means it's got less copper and lead in it. It's smaller. It means you can put more powder in there. And when you start doing stuff like that, think of a seesaw or a little scale with a little slidey weight on there. You're not getting nothing for nothing. So if you ask for a bigger projectile, you've got less room for powder and less, your powder either has to punch really hard to get it out there, or it has to, you don't have room for a slow burn, or I don't really know the math, but you're going to have different factors there. So again, when you're talking about all these different factors and you're doing your different math and you're figuring it all out, now you have to put into there, are you just trying to be accurate at range? Are you being accurate at range indoors where there's absolutely no wind? Are you trying to be accurate forcing it through weather, right? And other stuff that's out there, leaves and brush and clothing and somebody's ear, right? Like to get to where you need to go? Or is it just lobbing through indoor, non-moving air to get to a target? You know what I mean? So you're going to have a lot of factors there. And without more in the question, we don't know which way to take you. But I think going backwards again to Clover's thing about plus P, I was going to throw in a car. If that's like someone asking this question is like, I've got a Mustang that says the speedometer says it can go 125. Like, how many miles per hour can I go consistently safely? Well, you know what? You might be able to drive at 100 miles an hour all the time. I don't know if you have a racetrack you can do that on, but you're either going to get tickets or you're going to be putting other people in danger. But even if you had a racetrack and you just woke up every day and drove your car safely at 100 miles an hour around your racetrack, how long do you think that Mustang is going to last compared to the guy who just drives it on the weekends, compared to the person that drives it to work, compared to the person who delivers pizza in it? Everybody's Mustang is going to last a different amount of time.
And the person that does those things and fails to maintain it.
No, that's a great point too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ghost is saying, I know Sig used to say, do not ever use plus P plus. Plus P can be used every once in a while. I'm not sure if that's still the case. And maybe that's, again, going to the car analogy. Like, you might be able to put some nice fancy gas in there once in a while if you're going to go race with your friends on the weekend, but you wouldn't be putting that fancy gas in there every single day.
Right. Was the question just plus P, or was the question plus P plus?
It was plus P, but I think Ghost is saying like plus P never, plus P once in a while. But
yeah,
and that's the thing.
That was a great point. I'm glad he brought up plus P plus, because even though that's not in the question, it's important for people to understand if they're looking at a box of ammunition. Plus P and plus P plus, that's not a printing error on the box. That's
a flate, like, oh, I like to write it this way. That's an actual definition. That's a different
like 45 thing. ACP and 45 auto, or 45 or 380 ACP and 380 auto. Yeah, it's not the same thing. Yeah.
No, that's a good point too. Yeah, that's something. It would actually be an interesting one to do an ammo only show sometime.
Yeah. All
right, so we've wailed on that one a bit, and that's what it's about, giving us some opportunity to kind of riff on stuff. SS Pawn is out there. My brother required to carry factory critical duty ammo for security at his church. Oh, I see what he's saying. At first I was thinking gun shop because it's SS Pawn, right? But he's talking like in real life, his brother is required to carry in his firearm factory boxed brand name critical duty ammunition, right, for the role of being the security person at their church.
Right.
All right. And Weston's out there. I don't know if who's interested in this, but the guy from this one television show back in the day who had the guy from YouTube and this guy who was barefoot all the time, and they went around doing different like takes on survival situations. I forget his name, Cody, was on Mic Drop yesterday, a SEAL out of Texas that has a rescue for dogs, operating dogs that are with like SEALs and operating in military situations where that are no longer needed by their unit. So he takes care of the dogs. He does this podcast, and he had that guy on, and I was just seeing Weston was in there, and it's worth mentioning. That was literally one of the better podcasts I've listened to in a while. It was a really good podcast. It's just kind of all general too, from survival to just television to kind of an interesting all around. All right, so the next one, I don't know why it's being weird to me and it won't let me just scroll up a little bit, but if I initiated a gun purchase and passed the background check, do I have to reapply after 30 days, or can I pay and pick up my gun? All right, so there's a couple of reasons we can't answer this one 100%, but you want to start? I'll say, if I initiated a gun purchase and passed the background check, do I have to reapply after 30 days, or can I pay and pick up my gun?
Okay. Are they I have so many questions.
Right.
Because I'm thinking if I walk in to buy a firearm and I fill out the paperwork and they run the background check and I pass, why am I not walking out with it like as soon as I pass? So it's like, why are you? It's not, and maybe this is somebody that hasn't bought a firearm before and they think that it's an application process, and like somebody calls them and says, "Hey, you passed," and so
like applying for a loan or a mortgage.
Yeah, and it's like it should not be that way. You should pretty much know within a reasonable amount of time whether or not you pass that background check, and you pay for it and leave. So if you're talking about a situation maybe where you put it on layaway, most shops are going to, when you take possession, that's what the paperwork is more so about. It's not about making a purchase. It's about you taking possession of that from the dealer, right? So they're going to make you do that typically once you have satisfied whatever the requirements are of the layaway.
Tony's jumping in. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey, typically on the road, just like every Saturday.
No worries. Yeah, I'm glad it works out. I'm hoping that's working out. It seems like it's working out. But yeah, so we just had another question here. We just started talking about this person is saying, and it's kind of just like a weird question because it's out in the middle of nowhere and we have a lot of questions on it. If I just initiated a gun purchase and passed the background check, do I have to reapply after 30 days, or can I pay and pick up my gun? So Tony, you just jumped in, and that's the question. It's kind of open. But, you want to try stab at it?
They pass their background check and it's over 30 days.
No. They say if I initiated a gun purchase and then passed the background check, period, do I have to reapply after 30 days, or can I pick up and pay for my gun? So I don't. That's the thing. It's a weird question, and we're trying to decipher just the question itself, maybe where it's from, or Clover was just pondering it might have been a new person who hasn't ever bought a gun. But I'm thinking it could easily be someone with a waiting period or with some sort of a permit to purchase or something that they have to apply first, and they're asking more than one question, and we're understanding it differently because we're not, we don't deal with those layers.
Yeah, so coming from a wacko place like New Jersey, you initiate the purchase. I don't know what he means by that, whether it's initiate the purchase or initiate the paperwork, because we have the firearms, the pistol purchase permit that you have to get first. Then you go to the gun store, you pick out the firearm you want, you purchase it, but with the delays and with many people is coming into the firearms community in New Jersey, there was delays, and they could be delays up to a week, but you don't have, so you come back a week later after, filling out all your paperwork, they give you the gun. You just show ID and they give you the firearm. You don't have to have another background check. But again, it's a badly worded question, so we can interpret it as anything.
Well, no, that's the thing. And if you don't know, you don't know. And that's what we're trying to help.
Well, Mike out there saying in California, you pay for it. They do all the paperwork, run the background check, and you have up to 30 days. There is a 10-day, of course, wait period in California, he said earlier. But you have up to 30 days to go back and pick it up before they run it again. So.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just if you're a new gun owner or you just don't know, every state can be different. Every state can be different, so it's not.
Yeah, list your state. If you're just for those that may be putting questions out there or asking questions, especially online, if you're getting answers from somebody, make sure you frame your questions with your state. If you're talking about purchasing, possession, things like that, it helps a lot.
Yep, definitely.
So that's an awesome thing to illustrate. So let's talk about this for a second. When you go to purchase a firearm, it's not consistent. And the reason it's not consistent is because we have a Second Amendment which protects the individual's right to defend themselves and to protect themselves, right? And then the Second Amendment clarifies that the government can't infringe on the right to bear arms. But beyond that, it starts to get complicated because we have one nation, we have 50 states, and each of those states has cities and other jurisdictions within it. Each of those cities and jurisdictions can and have applied restrictions or infringements or rules, and some of those have been challenged and taken through the system, through the courts, to be challenged and deemed or ruled on, and then we've used those rules and applied them to other states. So what we've got is something that started out kind of easy in 1750 something, like 1776 or something, and then by about 1934, with the craziness of the gangsters and the consequences of prohibition and looking for scapegoats and this concept of, hey, let's blame and implement that everybody's afraid of, we started to get national laws. Those national laws only required a registration of certain guns, very short rifles, giant bored rocket launchers, and then suppressors, and then some other guns that barely existed, shot-off shotguns and machine guns. And then they required you to pay a tax and to register the guns, but not the person. A couple of years later, they said, you know what? That's not enough. Let's make it where you have to regulate the sale of guns through gun shops, and let's start to require manufacturers to keep track and where they send these guns. And then in 1968, after some assassinations, they created the Gun Control Act, which amended the 1934 NFA. And that Gun Control Act became Title I, and that said, you're going to have an we're going to reestablish FFLs. There's going to be these 10 questions. Then we're going to suggest that gun ownership is a vice, and that in order to be allowed by your state to be able to do it, you're going to have to qualify. You can't Those 10 questions on the 4473 come from all that. So you start to get national level stuff that was a result of some individual states doing some of that heinous infringements, and then no one paying too much attention to the states doing it, and it went federal. Since then, it got even crazier. I'm not going to be able to describe it all because it gets crazy, but what we're living in is the consequences of that, in addition to the regulatory agencies, the ATF, the FBI, and the state and local law enforcement agencies, all having different levels of authority over your right to possess a firearm due to the state and local laws that give those entities authority. So because there's so much variety in the country, which is a good thing, it's a whole bunch of experiments, and we get to see the consequences and results of all those different strategies and tactics. But because there's so many of them, it gets complicated. In general, though, because of the 1968 Gun Control Act, along with the 1938 FFA, Federal Firearms Act, we have FFLs and we have a 4473. So if you want to listen to everything I just said and forget about it, that's just setting the stage for it. The closest thing we have to consistency is a federal law that says any gun that's bought from a gun shop has to go through a NICS background check. And that's a 4473 piece of paper and a phone call to the FBI from the licensed dealer. Now, if you're going to buy a gun from your friend or your brother, in most states, that's not considered something that instigates a background check. However, in 9 states, they've instigated an infringement called universal background checks, which requires every exchange of property that's deemed a firearm to go through one of these licensed FFLs. So that's the only federal requirement, is that none. And then if you go through an FFL, you have to do a 4473 and a NICS check. And then in some states, all firearms transfers go through the NICS check and FFL. That's the biggest picture I can give and the most consistent thing we have. The next thing that starts to really screw with it is concealed carry permits. Each state has the ability or has taken the authority to offer a permit to carry a firearm concealed, starting with Alaska, Florida, and then the rest of the states. And now just recently, every single state has either may issue, only 9 states. All the rest of the states have shall issue, 42 states or something. You can, if you ask for the permission to carry, they give it to you. They have to, unless you're prohibited with those 10 questions from the 1968. Once you've got a concealed carry permit, most states, so most of those 42 states that offer them, you're going to, and the people that get them in the may issue, let's not write off that in may issue states, it's more expensive and more difficult to get a CCW, a concealed carry permit, but you can get one. Some people, usually rich people or people that are security guards or police or something, do get them. But those people who have a concealed carry permit typically have already passed the FFL, the 4473 type all to the NICS. So most states offer a pass for the FFL dealer who says, I need to call NICS, but this person has a concealed carry. So simply going to fill out the 4473 per my obligation to my federal permit. But that gives us this ability to not have to call in. After that, you get 5 or 6 states that require a permit to purchase. So you have to ask the state's permission, can I please purchase, and then get a permission slip. Then you get about 5 states that say you have to register the gun as soon as you own it. So as you're purchasing, it gets registered. Some states have waiting background, or what do they call it, waiting periods. And those waiting periods can go from 3 to 10 to 30 days, I guess. And then some states have, well, I'm not going to get into it forever, but there's more infringements than that. So I think that that's off this cuff the best I can offer as far as why it's difficult to answer a question about this. And then because there's so much stuff, like you think of a border state, a state like Arizona, think of Yuma, Arizona, which is on the border of California, and the amount of people they must have in a gun shop in Yuma, there's like 9 of them I've been to. Those shops in Yuma have an incredible amount of people coming from out of state. So their store policies, because they're a state, think of Yuma. Yuma is in the corner where Mexico, the international country of Mexico, an international border with Mexico, which is a whole nother thing, but they're on an international border with Mexico and an interstate border with California. They're also one of the coolest places to hunt birds, pheasants, and all this, because there's a whole bunch of crops in the Colorado River basin and everything. It's like an amazing place to hunt. So it draws a lot of people who want to leave California to hunt recreational or shoot recreationally and then hunt. Plus they're coming over there because of better, opportunities at the shops. Plus you got people from Mexico coming up and wanting to purchase. Think of the store policies of a gun shop in Yuma, Arizona compared to the store policies of a gun shop in Iowa. Think of what a gun shop in Iowa can do because they don't have the constrictions and the confines of that shop in Yuma. But I'm getting into craziness. I think that's the reason to explain why it's so difficult to answer a question. Like Clover said, you don't realize it, but tell us what state you're in, tell us a little bit more about the circumstances, and then it's a little bit easier to answer a question like this one, because this could be store policy, this could be state requirements, and then this could be just confusion with the terminology.
Yeah, and FFL dealers are given a lot of leadway with, to their discretion. It's their license that's on the line, right? Wanted to tell a quick story that relates to this and, how, crazy some people may view. But, I mean, today I picked up a shotgun. I contacted a guy from Virginia. He had a shotgun that I wanted. We entered into an agreement for me to purchase said shotgun. Dude from Virginia now. I'm in Texas. I sent him a money order with tracking and all of that good stuff. So I knew it got there. He boxed it up and sent the shotgun to my local gun shop through the Postal Service. I go to my gun shop this morning. It takes all of about 5 minutes. Fill out the paperwork. Of course, I've got the Texas license to carry, which covers my background check. Grab the shotgun and walk out the door. So, it literally, I mean, it's sad, but Mike out there is talking in California, it can take up to 30 days. It can literally take from less than 5 minutes to 30 days, depending on where you live.
Goes to saying, what if they have a waiting period, but you're out of town for a while and can't pick it up? That might be, and that's another thing. If I can't even imagine, not luckily, I moved, but I've had to buy one gun with a waiting period, and then I moved. And then, but I imagine in those circumstances, you must anticipate it, especially if it's a fixed one. But if it's a not fixed one, like a NICS delay or something, like, oh, I'm going hunting, for example. I going to go hunting with my shotgun like I always did. Oh, something happened, got a bonus, good overtime, something, luck of the draw. You got some extra cash. I can get that new shotgun before I go hunting. So you run over to the shop. Hey, can you get that in for me? Oh, we sure can. Oh, because of delays or whatever, we'll be able to get it for you 2 days before your hunt. You got the 2-day background check or whatever, blah, blah, no problem. You go there to do it. Uh-oh. New law. Everybody said it's cool to have background checks because they're going to save everybody's lives and stuff. So now it's a 5-day waiting period because that's way more effective than the 2-day waiting period. Now you can't take your shotgun hunting. You come back, had a bad day shotgun hunting because you had to go to Mossberg instead of a cool Remington, and then you go back to work, pay for all that hunting time, and then you totally forget about that gun. Go back to the shop. Now what are you going to do? You got to, depending on the state laws, the shop policy. That's the only two things I think. There's no federal law that would make you do it again. But actually, does the 4473 expire after 30 days? Stan would know. I don't remember anymore. 4473 does expire after some amount of time, but I thought it was like 3 months. But anyway, that can happen, and it's not like people are like, "Oh, I'm buying guns every day." But I'm trying to explain, like, there's some circumstances where.
You mean if the firearm is not actually transferred?
Well, and I guess that's something else I'm assuming. Now, might be different, but from what I understand, the 4473 is an obligation of an FFL. So in other words, like you wanted to sell a gun to somebody, you don't have a 4473 in your back pocket. Even if you did, you can't call NICS. You don't have any number or facility to call NICS.
Right.
You need codes and stuff to call into NICS. You just can't do it, which is good because it's not necessary. So you don't need a 4473, and you wouldn't be able to use one even if you wanted to use one. So a gun shop's obligation is to comply with their license regulations, and that's called NICS right now because of the stupid NICS thing that happened in like 94. Nobody paid attention to, and we haven't challenged yet. It's an opportunity because there's no reason to have NICS, and they're obviously laying in the serial numbers. But anyway,
Stan says if a person doesn't pick up the firearm the day of the initial application date, then he makes them re-sign and date the application when they pick it up.
That's necessary. That's exactly. So what I was going to say is when I'm used to is the gun shops dealing with FFLs as an obligation of regulation of their licensure. So they don't get to say do whatever they feel like with a 4473. Like it's a document. It's a government document. You don't just throw them around like fingerprint cards. Have you ever gone to a CCW instructor or something and they mess up fingerprint cards? They don't just say, "Oh, keep all your extra fingerprint cards." They rip them all up, right? Because they're federal documents. And they don't. There's like obligations as these people with licenses. So you can't walk in. I've heard of this before, and I've never heard of this in actual real life, but I've heard of this on the internet. You can't just go into a gun shop and say, "Hey, can you give me a 4473 and run a background check? Because I'm about to, I'm about to buy a gun." Like that never happens. You decide what gun you're going to buy. Sometimes you even buy it first, and then they run your 4473 and stuff. I guess depending on store policy, they might have you kind of do all that simultaneously, but I've never heard of a shop that's just like, "Sure, come on in. We're going to run 4473s for you." And you know what I mean, like that's something that's a more regulated and like an obligation than a service you provide. So I've never heard of like fill out a 4473, then look around and pick what gun you want. Then we'll finish it all up. It's usually look around, figure out what gun you want. Let's see if you can pay for it. Now let's get this stuff out of the way.
Well, you got to know when you call in. You've got to let them
All that
know
has to be on the paperwork. Exactly.
Right.
Like,
Right.
You can't just say like, "Oh, it's whatever." They're just seeing what it's like, what it's like this Thursday to run a 4473. Like nobody's got time for that.
Right.
And it's not legal, I don't think. But I don't know.
Yep.
But weren't you saying that you had a place where there's 4473s on clipboards or something?
Yeah. There is a gun shop around here that still does paper, and they're right there hanging on the wall. And yeah, you could get one and take it home, I guess, if you wanted to.
Well, I mean, you can always take one, but you're not gonna be able to do nothing with it. But it'll have the store's stuff on it, the store's stamp. And usually, if it's got the store's stamp, they don't want you taking it because it's got their stamp on it. Now they're tied to it.
No, the ones hanging on the wall don't have they're blank.
They're blank. Okay, so you'd have to look. Well, I don't know. It's not necessarily a stamp either. They'll have something.
Once it's filled out.
Okay, but then again, that's store procedure, or maybe they haven't been abused in a way, or maybe some stores have been abused in a way and do things differently procedurally wise. But what Dana's saying also is, let's say something happens, you're middle of buying your gun, and then daughter calls in and like something happened to Aunt Hilda's car and you got to get out of there quick. So you're all right, sorry, I'm going to buy this, but I got to get out of here. A month later you come in, or whatever, sometime later you come in, you don't get to just like, "Hey, let me throw you that gun and get out of here." You look at everything, you verify everything's the same as it was, and then you have them some signature or whatever. So there is some procedure for if something gets interrupted. And I think that's what Stan's kind of talking about too. Yeah. But that's a lot different than come in, fill out your 4473, put this on layaway, and then come back later and just take your gun. I think it's usually put your gun on layaway, pay for it, and when you go to take it home, fill out the 4473 and see you. But we're not going to fill out a 4473 2 months ahead of time. It's definitely not going to be worth anything 2-3 months ahead of time. And yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
All right, so we went all over the place on that one, but that's what it's all about. I don't know if Tony's got anything else to add to that one.
Nope, I'm good.
Right on. So, are you buying a car or anything today, or are you just driving?
No, I'm on my way back home from running errands.
Oh, right on. Let's see. I'm seeing if I'm missing a question. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time, and I'm not doing a good job. So you guys are all kind of chatting with each other to some extent. And if I'm missing a question in there, let me know. So I'm just going to go back to this one. I need to do something with this question because this is one that. Oh, what happened? I messed up. So I don't know what's going on. I added that one question by hand, and it's definitely screwing up my database. I need to figure out how to delete it.
Well, we got SoCal Reloader out there was asking about an adjustable pistol brace being
Okay.
legal in California.
Hmm.
And I mean, as long I am from Texas, I'm not from California. I suggest that you talk to somebody from California. But as far as I'm aware, if it is a legal registered pistol in California, yes, it can have an adjustable. I think that's part of unless they've changed something recently with legislation, and it's California, so it's entirely possible. Pistols don't fall under some of the same features requirements as rifles, and I think that's why another reason why pistol braces are as popular as they are.
And I don't know at all. I've got X amount of brain cells and I can't keep California. So I don't have enough of them to keep California stuff in there. So I could probably try to ramble off some people, but I'm assuming, some people listen to in California or ask in California. And then if there's anybody, Mike's in California, I think. If there's anybody in California that knows answers, have you seen any? Oh, adjustable stocks are on rifles. And then it's dependent on other things. Ghost is saying, I don't live in California, but as I understand it, as long as the lower is registered as a pistol and you have a fixed mag, it shouldn't be a problem. But I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That's a tough one. And I'm sorry that we can't answer it, but I'm glad that it's being asked, and I'm glad that you're exercising the choice to get into that. It's not like anybody wants to get into that quagmire, but without challenging it, they'll never see the frustration and the consequences. I don't know if anybody was watching the chat earlier today. Brooke Cheney was on with the Weekly Bullet, I guess, with Second Amendment Foundation, and Craig and Mike. No, Craig and somebody. Was it Mike? Craig and somebody else. And that lawyer guy, I don't know him. And then Paul and somebody had brought up the idea that I guess Craig was saying that legislatures will not really care about the consequences of their legislation and just keep pushing. And while that might be the case, then they're definitely leaving a wake of opportunity for us to point at the consequences of their ill-conceived legislation in the past, right? And say, look, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. We don't even have to be right. We just have to show that, or in that case, we don't have to prove that we're right. We can just show that their ideas are wrong. And if we don't do that, then they're just going to keep putting new paint on the old garbage, right? Keep repainting the old thing. So anyway, like I said, although we don't have the paint remover for you, I'm glad that you're making all us bringing it up again and doing the work to find the answer. Are there something like this in California? I mean, this is what the California forums do. They don't do it live necessarily, and it's happening like a million conversations at the same time. But the calguns.org, I think it was CalGuns, was the big forum. 30 days from the date it was initiated. I think it even says on there. It's not like I'm remembering something fancy. It's just like written on there. And I might be missing some stuff. The one FFL I use does paper 4473s. I would insist on a paper 4473 personally, but it's just me. I haven't bought a gun in a long time. I don't know if that's even possible. So show of hands. You guys have bought guns. I don't even remember last time I bought a gun, literally. I do not remember. It was years ago, probably. Unless I bought one off of somebody. But filling out a 4473, I can't remember the last time. And anyway.
The vast majority of purchases I've made in the last, I'm going to say 6-7 years. Quite some time. Yeah, I'm going to say 6-7 years, maybe even a little longer than that, have all been digital form, the vast majority.
Oh, really?
But
I've never done a digital 4473.
But I have also was contracted to set all of that up, so I also know how it works. I have technical background and I know how it works. And you're not logging.
You just admitted that you're in the pocket of digital 4473, big digital 4473.
Well, yeah.
Oh, shit.
It was good money.
Yeah, I bet. Got that 4473 money.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've never even considered doing a digital one,
But-
and I've only ever been to I've been in stores because I've been in stores that do them, but I wasn't buying a gun or anything. But I've never even, I don't think I've ever been offered a digital one. Like I've never been in a store where there was a digital one.
Well, most shops, I'm willing to bet the ones that I know that are they're almost exclusively digital. They have paper ones in the cabinet, and they'll get one out if you know. It just helps. It helps with their bound book. It helps with a lot of different. It helps with a lot of different things. And
Oh, I bet every time they want to do a trace, they probably don't even have to ask, right? If the trace is, or if they can hook up electric.
They do. Yes, they do. There's no you don't get into from the outside into the 4473, and it's printed, right? You got to sign it. So once you fill in all the data, it goes back and forth between two intranet PCs, not internet.
Okay,
two intranet PCs. It goes back and forth between a dealer and basically a host. Well, I wouldn't even say it's not even like a server and a workstation. It's the dealer and the person filling it out. Right? It goes back and forth in between those PCs. I think 3 different times. Dealer initiates it. You type a few things. You click a button. The dealer clicks a button. You type a few more things. The dealer types some things, and then you click a button. So there's some back and forth, and it doesn't take that long. And then it prints. So, and then you sign
so you're saying
you
that
you end up with a paper copy in the end.
Period, and that's it.
Yes.
And not both. Like
there's no data. It does pull data, like I said, into printable stuff for the
dealer. Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen form filler outers before. And if you're talking like an iPad that fills out the forms on an HTML or something and then just populates the lines basically and then prints it nice, that's different than save and now we have a copy for, that we upload to our cloud, the ATF cloud, and then ATF can just randomly thumb through all these cloud versions of it. So that's what I was afeared of. So that's not happening.
No. It's printed, and then there's still a paper copy. So
here's what I would do then. I would take their damn iPad and I would put my thumb over the camera. Every time you pick up an iPad, there's a camera on there. So remember that and put your thumb over it because there's no need for them to have a picture of you signed in nothing, right? And then I would sign it or whatever I got to do, and I would grit my teeth because of technology. But I understand what you're saying. I guess you'd have to do it that way. And I was just going to say, I can remember back in the day, well, I guess I wasn't going to say, but before I didn't feel like interrupting you guys when you were going to say stuff, but back in the day, I can remember going into shops where if you got like anything wrong, especially J&G sales, if any of y'all know about J&G sales, if you get anything wrong on a 4473, anything, if you put a comma instead of a period, they're taking that from you, ripping it up, and you're starting over. That was like doing a written test. Like I did not like getting stuff at J&G or waiting for other people because I was pretty good at doing 4473s, right? Because I did them all the time. But when a friend or somebody would do one, they almost never were familiar with it. And then like they are finicky. So they must get wailed on in their audits. But I guess that eliminates all that. If you do it electronically, you're only going to print once. You're not going to go through like a dozen with each customer.
Well, you don't have the option to reprint is the thing. So you have to verify that it printed. You know what I mean?
Oh, that could be, I guess, annoying, but that's all another level. That's just if they got a good tech or good equipment. If it's going to be like frustrating to like for me, something.
Right.
So that was a question from the thing that we kind of went around on, and Mike was saying that CalGuns is the place to go. So I threw a link in there to calguns.org to ask questions about California. And again, I don't want to say that we're blowing you off. You gave us an opportunity to chat about it from a couple of different angles. It's just that we know when we're out of our wheelhouse or when something's too specific to give blah, blah, blah advice over the internet, right? Okay, so this is where someone was asking if it was broke, and I asked to see if it was broke. So this one we knew was a calibration question. Thanks for that. Do guns make of metal? Anyone?
That's an easy one. Yes.
Yes, all the metals.
Just darn near any metal you can think of. Been a gun made out of it. Yeah.
And more, because then you get plastics and stuff too. I've never seen. Is there a stone gun? There must be some kind of mortar, probably.
I don't know.
Oh no, the meteorite gun.
Probably.
That's kind of no, it's metal, I guess.
There you go. Yep, from Cabot.
So let's see. I think we might have said this one before, but no, maybe not. I acquired a very old MP5 lower receiver. It appears to be complete. Has a 3-position selector labeled S, E, and F. Is this full auto? How do I tell? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to sell it? What is it worth? So I'm vaguely familiar with the questions here, but specifics, I'd have to look it up. Do you guys have any insight on this one?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up too. A receiver on you said an MP5, right? So the auto sear is the registered component for an MP5. So, to my understanding.
Yeah, I think one of the neatest things about the MP5 is they're super modular before anything else was modular, right? They're proprietary, but they're modular.
Yeah.
So the lower is just a chassis. You've got a trigger group, and then whatever the sear you're saying is the full auto part.
Right. Yeah.
And that means you can buy an H&K with a long barrel and it's just a gun, or you could buy one without a stock and a short barrel and it's just a pistol, or SBR it and get a short barrel and a regular stock on it, or nowadays pistol with some kind of pistol brace, or buy a sear and then every HK you come across, you drop in your little sear and now ding, it's like you've got the magic power up. Ding! Now you're full auto, and you're full auto, and you're legally transferring your little sear into all your friends and all of your HKs. That was it's like a lightning link. Like that was one of the coolest things in concept. And then in reality, how much do H&Ks cost? So it's like, hey, can I drop my magic link into your $3,000, $5,000 gun? For like one trigger pull, and then you're taking it out, and I don't want to break my gun. Like people didn't necessarily, at least in my experience, didn't run around shooting them full auto all the time. But as far as the other stuff, how do you tell, and how much is it worth? You guys have any insight or anything to add? Because I'm everything I've done with HKs has been at elbow's distance, watching other people do it.
As far as what's the question or what?
Well, the question again is, I acquired my MP5 lower receiver, a very old MP5 lower receiver, appears to be complete, has that 3-position selector with S, E, and F, and then they're asking, is it full auto? How do they tell? And what do they need to do?
Oh, he said it appears to be complete. Okay, so if you just received it and it appears to be complete, and it does have the auto sear in it, you're holding 10 years and $10,000 if you've been fines. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, you definitely need to figure that out somehow really, really quick. I missed the whole. I didn't key up on the complete. I was thinking it's just a receiver, but he's like, oh, it looks all complete. Well, that's problematic because if it wasn't built, even if it was built prior to '86, it wasn't. You can't go back and register it. There's no grandfathering or anything else. So if it wasn't registered already, you're screwed. So like let's say your grandfather, has some type of a old Milcert full auto that, was brought back for whatever reason, right? And you find it in his attic after he's dead and gone, clean it up 2 months from now, bury it, turn it in. I mean, what do you do with it? Because you're screwed, basically, if he did not register it prior to that. So this just went from an interesting question and a conversation about the modular capability HK to, whoa, I don't know what to advise this guy within the realms of legality,
I mean, you're not wrong. It's just that realistically, that's not an inexpensive gun. HKs, even for units, the reason you don't see them in American police is because they cost a ton of money. Not always. They're never inexpensive. And the odds of someone, there was no like Vietnam or Korea who never had MP5s laying around. So the only way you'd acquire an MP5 is by being in a unit that didn't monitor their own arsenal, which doesn't happen. Like if you give out $7,000, $10,000 guns in 1980s to people, you want them back. You don't just take them home. So more than likely, what this person has is some kind of clone H&K, and being complete is,
Or maybe a parts kit.
well, it could be, I guess possibly, but I mean, back in the day, I was actually going to look at this stuff, but back in the day, you could get H&K parts kits, but they've always been rare because, again, they're expensive, and you can, let's say you're the Lord of War guy in that movie, you've got an H&K parts kit. Are you going to sell it to an American for a couple of bucks, or sell it to somebody else as an H&K? Like, nobody doesn't want everybody wants an H&K. Even if it doesn't work, you want to walk around with an H&K. That's better than a crink. Like, that's the best gun you could have for your bodyguards. So there's no way MP5s aren't worth something, even if they're broken. So that's what I'm saying. Like, just finding a random one, I doubt. But there's so many like clones of them now that more than likely they've got a clone, and what a novice who's asking a question on a forum or whatever is thinking is complete is not necessarily what you're getting to there, is what I'm saying. So more than likely they've got modular trigger pack. And the thing about HKs too is you can get like the 3 burst, you can get the semi, you can get all these different trigger packs that the armorers could just plug in and plug out for different applications or whatever, because that was kind of a cool thing back in the day. So what people do is buy trigger, I think what they do is buy trigger packs based on what they want their gun to look like. I want it to look like a Navy SEAL, or I want it to look like a British SAS, right? And it doesn't matter, because like you said, the sear is what makes it full auto. So having the trigger pack is just cool looking. So I think it's like an Uzi trigger pack, where people are like, oh, I want mine to have like the original Uzi trigger numbers on it.
Yeah.
I think Uzi's a little different.
Did it say, did the question say receiver, or how was it worded again?
Well, it says MP5 lower receiver, which is, from what I understand, a big boat of plastic with all these, it's like a, like a modular insert that goes in there with all the parts, right? The trigger. Like I said, I've never actually.
Here's the other thing. So for quite some time, and I don't know if they still do, Umarex made a 22 version. Now you got the GSG 5s. I've got one of those. I think Ghost out there has one of those.
Yeah, and
that's a 22 copy of an MP5, right? But it's not actually marked HK. So here's the thing, though: the Umarex work because they're licensed by HK. Right. So if it's a 22 lower from a Umarex, then it would say H&K, and if you didn't know the difference, except for dimensions, and obviously dimension-wise, it's not the same as an actual MP5. But just looking at it and not knowing, you might assume that it's an MP5 receiver. Also,
I spoke to HK in February and at the Great American Outdoor Show, and now it says HK on it. Still made by Umarex, but it will say HK on it. So
it's more authentic looking and more cool looking.
Yeah, it's more authentic looking and HK.
Well, and they paid good money for that license, right? And they want to be proud of it.
Yeah, the Umarex. Talking about the Umarex stuff.
Yeah.
The Umarex is. I mean, I was looking at buying one probably at least 5 or 6 years ago, at least, and it had HK on it, even back then.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because I was speaking to him, and they were like, yeah, it's totally marked up.
So HK, I don't have any contacts with HK, but I have multiple contacts with Umarex, and I've had them on the podcast, and I've talked with them several times, and they're really big sticklers with the licensing. So they're not going to put out anything unless they have the licensing, and part of getting the licensing is putting that company's name on the thing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because
why would you?
The department I work with had HK USPs, and these guys continually asked me to train them on it because the trigger was rough. I mean, it just simply is if you don't shoot a lot. So I picked up a Umarex Airsoft.
Oh yeah.
And the trigger pull was the first trigger pull was exactly the same as their issued firearm.
I didn't even think about that, but that could be some type of an air gun lower or even airsoft potentially.
That's true too. I don't think anyone sold him a full auto lower. He'd know the price difference.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, even if it was a shady black market deal, you would think that'd be pricey.
So now I don't know how MP H&K MP5s work, but let's say it was an AK, because I know how that works and that's way easier to deal with. Let's say you had an AK, and for some reason, because a lot of times actually AKs will have all their normal engravings on there, so they'll have the full auto selector mark, and this you can put it in full auto and everything. It just doesn't actually do full auto because, like Clover's saying, there's another part inside of there that gets engaged when it's actually a full auto, and those aren't in the gun. And you don't have a third pin to even hold that part on an AK. But you can engrave it, and a lot of people do, to have it look cool. And you can put it into this place where it would be if it was an AK that was in full auto. So if you were questioning, is my AK full auto? Because it has a selector on there. You put it in the safe and you make sure the gun's clear. You try to take out the magazine. And then once you're sure the chamber's empty and they're clear, you put it into the full auto and then start pull the charging handle back and then let it go as if you chambered around. Right, and then pull the trigger. What's going to happen? The hammer is going to go forward because you have it in the full auto selector. Now, with your finger still on the trigger, depressing the trigger, right? Use your left hand, come up and start racking the charging handle. And if you start racking the charging handle and the hammer drops every time you go forward, in other words, it's engaging the hammer every time the slide is sliding back and forth, then yeah, it's full auto. But realistically, what's going to happen is the first time you pull it back, there's no sear, so when you pull it back, the hammer's going to stay back, even though you're pulling back the trigger. When you let go of the trigger and pull it again, then the hammer will fall. But that's the way I would tell on an AK. You can do that on an AK as easily as having the lower and just pushing on the hammer and pulling the trigger back and kind of letting the hammer go up and down to simulate what I just described with the bolt and everything. You can do that with an AR. You can do it with anything that might have the position that says fire, and then the ability to take the gun apart and fiddle with the hammer. So that's a test. I don't know if you can do that with an HK because, like I say, I've never actually fiddled with the mechanism. I don't know if the HK has that.
My FAL is that way. It has safe, fire, full auto, right? Safe, semi, full, and it has the markings on the receiver. It was a kit. Has the markings on the receiver. You can flip the selector all the way around. Why in the world you'd want full? I've shot a full auto FAL. They suck. But it fires in semi when you flip it. I mean, it's there's no difference between semi and flipping it around to full, except for it's in a position that says full.
Let's say you had a really thick gallon of paint. You could put that on your back and then shoot a FAL in full auto, and then it would shake that paint up pretty good.
The problem with the FAL in full auto, at least the one I shot, was like by the third shot, you're shooting like straight up in the air at that point. I mean, it's just it's so difficult to hold on to.
Think of
an interesting story that I heard was, I can't remember what skirmish and engagement, war, whatever battle it was, but it was somewhere over in the France area, somewhere over in that area. But there was two, I can't even remember the two sides, but one side had full auto FALs, one side had semi-auto FALs, and the troops that had full auto FALs, when they would kill a guy with a semi-auto, would drop theirs, the mags interchanged, everything interchanged, right? They would throw theirs down and pick up the semi-auto.
That was the British and the Argentinians.
Yeah,
it was like full auto right. Only, you mean? Like they had to shoot full auto or something?
Yeah, it was full auto only. Yeah.
Crazy. Now, see, I heard the reverse, that the Brits, when they dropped an Argentinian, they wanted the full auto FALs, and they would drop them. It's like, hey, obviously the grass is greener, right? It was like, I have the ability to lay down full auto and suppressive fire, and the Brits were like,
doesn't help any good when you're firing into the air, though.
Dude, full auto FAL of 7.62 that weighed that little becomes an anti-aircraft rifle around 4 shot.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you really have to control it, and still, because I had this conversation.
If you fired from the hip, you could spray fairly straight, but you would literally have to fire. You couldn't fire from the shoulder, I don't think, and do it.
I had this conversation earlier today. The military rarely just holds down the trigger and does magnums. I mean, it's just inefficient, ineffective. What you do is do 5, 6, 7 round burst, and you just lay down cover fire or harassing fire. But yeah, the magnums, that's for funsies for the most part, especially in 7.62 by 30, 7.62 by 51.
Right.
Because I rocked the M60 E3 back in the day when I was in, and believe me, 5 or 6 round burst.
That's what I was going to say. It's sort of like when you start thinking about the machine going off, right? With 308, that's a lot of recoil and a lot of power that you're kind of have to control because they equal and opposite reaction things. So
Yeah.
you're either holding it at your shoulder, and then I was going to say it's almost like you're, especially in full auto with 308, and it's got enough rate of fire, you're almost going to try to think of like doing a pull up on that front of that gun because you're yanking it down, right, constantly. But then, as you were talking about, they were telling them to shoot from the hip. That's, if you look at the old M16 stuff too, that's the same thing. Like if you're trying not to let that muzzle rise, then yeah, you want to hold that thing like down up front like a fire hose, and then you end up using your pelvis or your waist as like the fulcrum, and then your other hand holding the fire hose down up front, and you got the weight of your shoulders and everything on it. And then watching your tracers, you're watching the dust. I mean, you're dropping belt fed or you're dropping mags of 20 or 30. Yeah, you're not aiming with your sights. That's for semi-auto. You're throwing them down there, and usually so that somebody can run somewhere, somebody doesn't stick their head up, or to figure out where they're going to shoot back from. You're doing some other strategy there.
Right.
But that's interesting too. I'll let you guys riff on that, but maybe not. I don't know. I'll let you also answer this question. We're right about in an hour, so we could actually end it at an hour, but it always seems like we're cutting it off too soon if we end it here. But so first question, should we end it at an hour? Second question, do you want to take a riff on the different recoil impulses of different guns? Because we kind of barely alluded to it here, but the MP5 being whatever that's called with its delayed roller blowback or something,
Right.
versus like with some of the other ones we just talked about, the biggest differences amongst these guns is that the amount of mass and the way that it's being moved with springs and with tubes of metal and things, and the dwells and the things like this. Like shooting guns is like the difference between driving a moped and a crotch rocket and a Harley. Like they're all motorcycles and a dirt bike, but they're all different to ride, and they're all different recoil impulses is the best word I've heard for it, for like the way that you shoot these guns. So it's not really a question that's in here, but anyway, those two questions. Do you want to riff on that, and then, or should we just leave that for next week and wrap it up at an hour?
Well, I think, yeah, I don't know. I think we could go 90 minutes probably, since we're a little bit over the hour mark. What I was going to say before we were talking about, things hard to control in full auto is, makes a difference too if, you see a lot of things mounted, right? Whether it's vehicle mounted or, whatever the case may be, or tripod mounted and things like that. But the thing about taking something like maybe an FAL or, anything, larger caliber, and mounting it like that is now you've created a situation where that firearm, not all firearms, obviously there are firearms that are made to be mounted, but when you're talking about one designed for shoulder fire, let's use the FAL as an example, and you mount that to something, now you're putting that firearm, locking it into a position that, yes, it's easier to control and use, but that's not the way it was intended to function. And so what type of additional wear are you causing on that firearm, right? What kind of lifespan are you going to get out of that now because you've totally changed the way that you're firing it? So there's going to be a trade-off, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's definitely
with the bullets.
Yeah, it's definitely wear and tear because a lot of things, the FRT trigger, what we have here, the rare breed FRT trigger, you can drop in your AR-15. And it's fun for a couple of range trips, but understand there's going to be wear and tear on your regular Anderson, whatever. I mean, it was not meant to be full auto. And really, realistically, most of us are not going to be able to afford to shoot it enough to damage it. But you're doing something that was not meant to be. And as far as mounting stuff, stuff designed to be mounted is designed to be mounted.
Right. So
you won't have that issue. Again, with medium machine guns, with heavy machine guns, I mean, the difference between shooting a 50 cal mod deuce and shooting the M60 on a tripod, huge difference. At least I felt it was, but it's all relative. And when I was in the Corps, we didn't have full auto for the rifles. We had 3-round bursts with M16A2.
Yeah.
You did too, right, Pete?
No, well, no, they existed. They came out, right? Well, they existed, but nobody was getting them yet. So you guys probably got them because you guys used them, right? So yeah. I think in one time. Like in basic for us, you go and do a bunch of stuff, and every once in a while when something's too expensive, they just show it to you, like a claymore.
Okay.
Like you're never going to let us all have a claymore. But, so some stuff they're just going to show you. I think they showed us that. I had a question because pretty sure I remember this, but like I say, I never had any use of it or never fiddled with it. When they're 3-round burst, what was that, A2, if you went bang, bang, the next time you pulled the trigger, it would go bang. And then you'd go bang, bang, bang. And then it would be like bang. And then it would be bang, bang. Like you're always going to get 3. And that's why it would hiccup and be weird to people. And they would think that they're anticipating 3, but it's going to give them the last 2 from their prior 3. They're thinking they're going to get 3. It gives them 1 from their prior burst. And that's where people would be like, my gun's broke. And then armorers would be like, no. And then they'd be like, ah. So that's how I understand it. That's why I asked.
Yeah, that's how it worked. It was horrible. Just either give full auto or don't.
Because for us, it was like everything you did was semi-auto, at least for the Army, right? Regular Army, normal Army, not like, right? Like everything semi-auto, and then once in a while it's like, or maybe twice, they were like, okay, this range is full auto, and your goal is to shoot 3 rounds, and if you don't, then you're not going to keep playing with it. Because if you went out there and went, they'd be like, you're done. You know what I mean? They're like, you're not trying. So if you went like 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, that's how you stayed on the line the longest. And trust me, we all sat there figuring out exactly the number that we wouldn't get kicked off so we could keep playing, because that was the only time we got to play with it in the training, right? So, and you're literally on bleachers watching everybody else. So when you're good, you're the platoon leader, you get to wait till the end. You're talking to everybody else who's waiting till the end, and then you're like, all right, 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 3, and we're going to stay up there and drop 3 mags. Because you know what I'm saying? Like otherwise, it'd be like, okay, you're good. If you went up there and were like 3, 3, 3, they'd be like, tap you on the head, you're done. Like, oh man. And if you went, you'd barely get a mag out, tap you on the head, you're out of here. So it was that kind of thing.
It's so true. Only the military can have you hang out with all your friends, give you full auto firearms, and still screw it up and make it not fun.
Now, when you're talking M60, my story for M60 is we would do this game where you'd throw pennies at the corner of where the wall hits the floor, and then whoever got it closest to the wall won all the pennies. You ever play that game? When you're bored and all you have is pennies, that's a game you can play. So sort of like you just throw your penny at the wall, and whoever gets it closest to the corner of the wall and the floor, right, gets all the pennies. And however many people throw a penny in there is how many pennies you get. It's pretty simple. And if you lose, everybody runs away and you lose 5 cents. You know what I mean? Like nobody really cares. And you can't get in trouble because it looks like some pennies are laying there. It's a pretty good game. So what I would do is go, I'll give you all my pennies. I get 2 of your rounds when we go to the M60. So it helps to have big brothers and people who know what's going on when you go into places like basic and wherever where you're super bored and the only fun you're going to have is to pull a belt of an M60. So for most of basic, I was playing around, like farting around and trading everything I could for, rounds out of their belts. Because I knew when we get to M60, they're going to give us a belt. You're going to have to be this person who holds the belt. And then you're going to be the guy who pulls the trigger. So when it came to that time, my belt was like, that's when I pulled in all my favors. Give me my bullets, give me my bullets, give me my bullets. Everybody else had a little belt. Nobody had half a belt. Crowdfunding in basic. And now I had like a belt like 3 times longer than everybody. It was amazing. Best time ever. And you actually get to learn, because otherwise everybody gets like, here's what happens in real life. You've been waiting all basic to get to your M60 or whatever. And then you're like, it takes you half a belt to even learn how to shoot the dang thing. And then you try to shoot the dang thing well, and then you're done. And they don't tap you on the head. You get your belt, right? Everybody gets it. But they don't count how many are in your belt. They've got other things to do, so they don't realize. So I actually got to lay on the 60 for a while where everybody, and plus I was an M60 armor before I even went to basic. So pro tip, if you got kids that are heading up, they can do, at least I think they can still do armorers courses, correspondence before basic. So I was already an M60 armor head. So I was 100% focused on getting to play with an M60 because I would not go in infantry. I wasn't going to, my job wasn't going to be playing with an M60 or lugging an M60. But I wanted as much playtime as I could in training. But anyway, that's my M60 story from basic.
Yeah, man. I mean, we had the M60 E3, and I enjoyed everything about it except the weight, but that was what it was. And then they had the Mini, FN Mini in 5.56. They didn't have the, what is it, 240?
Yeah, the 240 was one of those things like, you see that? That's a 240. If you grow up and be good, you'll be able to play with one of them maybe if it sticks around.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it was like.
We were the last
man.
unit to shoot the law. Everybody else got the AT4 or something.
AT4, yeah. It's entertaining to realize that you've gotten older and the weapon systems themselves have changed. I'm like, yeah, now I know what the guys from Vietnam felt like when I was talking about the stuff we were issued. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you guys got the M16A1. We have the M16A2. It was not a huge difference, but you could see the incremental change. And now I'm looking at the guys with what, 8 HK416s. The Marines get issued that now. We call it the IAR.
Did you see there's a new thing?
Well, from Sig?
I think so. And it may be even a new caliber or cartridge.
Yeah, 6.8 something or another Sig. Yeah. It's interesting. Makes me feel old. But things change, man. It's been decades since I was in the military. So it should change. But that's just going to the Army, by the way, not the entire military. But of course, where the Army goes, everybody else eventually follows.
The bolt will break on most ARs in full auto. I don't know about that.
I don't know.
I only know that because I only say that because I know a ton of people that bump fire all the time. Just because as soon as you teach somebody how to bump fire, then they bump fire a lot, especially when ammo is cheap. So I've seen a ton of ARs that didn't break bump fire, and then you get those bump fire stocks and things, or those triggers now. I didn't even think about them. But then I was also going to say what our thing to do was, we had a friend or two that had a full auto and an AR. When you have a full auto, that's the lower. And the nice thing about an AR is you pull those two pins, you borrow your friend's full auto lower, put it on your upper, and now you can shoot some full auto out of your gun, kind of, because an AR is the barrel, in my opinion. So you can try your gun out in full auto and see how it would be, and then give your full auto lower back to his full auto lower back to him, put your lower back on. So I've definitely shot my little pistol. What is it? I have an obnoxiously small one, it's like a 7-inch barrel or something on my pistol. And everybody was like, your barrel's too short. I'm like, dude, as soon as the one dude let me, in fact, the picture, is that my lower? I think the picture that the violence policy place stole from me back in the day, I think that's my friend's full auto lower on my pistol upper, laying on a pile of brass that we shot up in the mountains that day. So I know that my pistol works because they were all like bugging me that pistol wouldn't shoot full auto. It kind of did. I mean, it didn't perform well, I guess. And the problem is, when we were talking about math before, it worked. It shot all the bullets out of it. But how effective is a 223 out of a 7-inch barrel at distance? It's going to be a tumbling feather, right? It's not going to do the damage it could do effectively if it was twirling and had some energy in it. Well, it's the difference between lobbing a 223 and shooting a 223.
Since 2013, especially, and the rise of the AR-15 platform to common use, commonality, everybody and their grandmother having a company that builds this, that, and the other. There's been a lot of inferior bolts out there, and so in semi-auto, for most people going out and pleek and that sort of stuff, they'll be fine. But then you start running them fast like that. Another thing is, you got to realize, with modern times comes a lot of people building their own, and they don't realize staking the gas key, right? And all of these other things that can contribute to those types of issues too. The more it's shot, the faster it's shot. All that has to do with dwell and where those gases are at any given time in the cycle. And there's a lot that goes into it when you really think about it.
No, you make up great points, and I just assumptioned right over all that. But you're right. Like, my barrel is a Model 1 sales little barrel, which is still decent. It's not like it's poor quality, but everything I got on it is BCM, because my friends wouldn't let me build with anything less than that, and everybody else's stuff is BCM or better. So
all the Model 1 sales stuff I've got is still running strong.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's good stuff.
They were one of the earliest companies. Yeah, they were one of the earliest companies to start selling stuff.
And everything I've done.
Yeah, they were. Everything you've done what?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying everything I've done is from like mid 2000s, and everything we own is BCM or better. Like everything that all my friends own better stuff than me, and I own.
Well, there wasn't
so
El Cheapo back then, right?
that's what I mean. There hardly was.
Model 1 sales was El Cheapo back then.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then,
it was.
you know, you had Yankee,
the introduction of all the new manufacturers. There's just a massive amount of new options that we just didn't have back then. So that is, I'm not taking that into effect. You're right.
You had Bushmaster, you had Yankee Hill, you had DPMS, you had, I mean, my ARs are built more out of DPMS. Yeah, Rock River. Yep.
Rock River. Yeah, that was what I was trying to think.
Yep. Yeah.
And then Armalite. Yeah, that actually, man, we could have a whole chat on just we should have a chat actually. Oh man, how about this?
Old school.
No, well, yeah, take just our experiences, and Dan, if he shows up, our experiences, but just with the ARs, like how we got into them, and then our experiences owning them and dealing with them, and then take everybody through like an hour or 90 minutes of the story from our perspective of the AR. Because I mean, I know that there's a picture of Kalashnikov and Stoner smiling, laughing in a picture. I know the story of why they're smiling, because Eric, the guy who ran Volter here in Tucson, he gave us I'd gone over maybe 3 times to do factory tours over there, and he would mention it to people on the tour that picture, the reason they're laughing is because Kalashnikov was laughing at how tall and bald Eric was. And then they took that picture as he was making some kind of Russian joke about bald people. And how cool is that? And that's Stoner. And then we could definitely have a cool conversation about the ARs. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be neat.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's interesting to watch it change, because you get older, but we've been gun guys for a long time, and we've watched a lot change in the industry, from acceptability to what was the common firearm then till now, what was accepted, what do you call those things, the wives' tales and everything else. Like, we've watched that change, and I don't feel that old, but really it does. A lot changed in the time that we got into this compared to somebody that might have gotten into guns in the 30s, from the 30s to the 60s or 70s. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
In our tenure, almost everything about what's common use changed. Common calibers changed. It went from 38, 357 to 9mm. I mean, it's like during the time we grew up, shotguns. What semi-auto shotgun that worked when we were in our teens and 20s? Not really.
Browning.
Well, and then, seriously, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Browning, let's see, semi-auto, Browning, and Remington 1100.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's it. That literally is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mossberg,
back in the day, you had the ability to care or to have like an influence of your family, friends, and gun shops. Period. Like, what else could there possibly, maybe marketing to some
magazines,
heroes or something.
Magazines,
but that development. So I totally dig that. We're definitely gonna, maybe even we'll do it as a theme to the show where maybe we spend the last half hour or something like this, or the last couple of minutes with a reflection on, and then change that filter, because ARs are interesting and there definitely could be a whole show. But we could, like you just kind of, everything you just mentioned. I mean, really. Let me ask this. Going back to ARs to kind of get the taste buds going for folks. So we're all old enough that ARs did exist, I guess, our whole lives technically, but they definitely didn't come to the scene until we were already old enough to be shooting and stuff. So the first part of the question is, did you always like the AR? And if not, or if so, like, what was the point where you decided I'm getting an AR? Because we all own them, I guess, at this point. So I'll shut up.
As a gun kid, I liked everything. Junior ROTC in high school, we didn't get them. We didn't even get to handle anything resembling them. So the first time I got to put my hand on an M16 AR-15 pattern firearms, of course, Marine Corps boot camp, and you lived with it. You became integral. It became integral to you. Um, just the manipulation of it, the shooting of it, it just became second nature. After I got out the Corps, I like surplus. I mean, I always liked surplus guns, and that's what I purchased for surplus guns. I really didn't care about an AR or buying an AR until after I became a firearms instructor and people wanted me to give classes on the AR-15. And then when I got it, it was really like what do you call those potato chips? You can't have just one. It became like Lay's, and it's like I want this, I want that, and I also decided to try some things out and do some weirdness with it, like a polymer lower on my AR. So I had the G-Wax Armory lower. And as time went on, you know, I checked out PSAs. And then I got my Saber Defense clone. So I've gone through it all. Now I have a non-NFA 7.62 by 39. You know, I mean, I've just gone through a lot of different iterations of the AR-15s that weren't there back in the day. But I found it interesting because I really believe we're in the golden age of firearms. All right, hold on.
About Clover.
First time I shot an actual AR was pre AWB. So you know, I'm gonna say in 90 to 92 ish, probably in that range. That being said, I don't know if anybody remembers the pellet rifle that the handguard pumped from back in the day. But I did have one of those from, I don't know, back in like the mid 80s or something. So it was a long time. I mean, it shot one then, and I was of the mind like the pellet rifle's okay. You get out, you play around with it. I'm like, this looks cool, but it gets into the FUD mentality a little bit because it's like, okay, it looks cool, but my Bolt 30-06 or my Bolt 270 or my, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, what can I do? What's the difference? What can I not do? What do I need that for? Right. And then you don't really pay that much attention. You grow and you learn, and then you start realizing, oh crap, we're under, you know, oh, AWB, what did that mean? Oh my God, now we've been under it for 4 or 5 years, and this is crazy. So my first AR that I purchased was post AWB sunset, and it was a DPMS Panther, and then very shortly after that, it was like, yeah, you know, you can like buy parts and just put together whatever you want, however you want it with an AR, right? It's like literally you probably already have most of the tools. You need like $100 worth of extra tools to do it right. And I'm like, no kidding. And I'm a do it myself type person anyway. And so a little bit of homework on it. Didn't take long. And then, you know, back then, again, it was DPMS, it was Rock River, it was Yankee Hill, it was Model 1 sales, which you could get parts, you could get complete uppers, complete lowers, you could get all kinds of things. And there was some other companies too. If we ever do that show, it's going to be interesting to maybe do a little bit of homework ahead of time with some of the other companies that I would shop. But yeah, like Tony said, you can't have just one. So that one store brand out of the box, whatever you want to call it, DPMS turned into, I don't even know how many I own now. All purpose built, purpose driven, and it didn't take me long to get into. I'm a big fan. When it comes to ARs, I'm a big fan of alternative caliber. I'm not a traditionalist. I'm not a 5.56 guy with an AR. I want the 458 SOCOM. I want the 6.8 SPC2. I want the 458 SOCOM. I want to play around with different calibers and different things and different configurations and all that kind of stuff. So building was conducive to that. That being said, I haven't built one for myself. Assembled, let's say assembled, and when I say building, I don't mean pinning it upper to a lower. I don't even, when I say build or assemble, that's not what I'm talking about. That's literally pinning two parts together. But I have neither built or assembled anything for myself probably since the 458 SOCOM, which I laid in the order like December before everything that happened in January, the 1st of January and February of 2013. And I laid in my order for those parts, and it was like 2 years before I got those parts. They were back ordered for like 2 freaking years. So, 2015-ish. So it's been, 6, 7 years, something like that, since I've even built one for myself. So, yeah, I'm out of practice a little bit on it. That being said, I did have to put one together. We talked about last week, I think. I did have to put one together at the helping out my local gun shop weekend before last. So that was fun. So the skills are not that perishable. It can, especially if you got the right tools and all that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely good. And then just doing this little teasers at the end of shows about whatever another future topic would be. I don't want to make the thing like this Ask Gun Questions themed every week, but maybe once a month we'll do a themed one, and then at the end of the themed one we'll tease into the next one. Because if we did something like this with our experience with revolvers or the 1911 or the Glock, right, like pick any cool like theme of guns, and we could rip on it.
What tickled me and I found interesting, so I'm definitely in for an AR. Looking back, AR chat is both of you guys know Model 1 sales, and I always thought Model 1 sales was some podunk hillbilly redneck company from here in Texas. It's like,
no, they're at every gun show, right? Everywhere it sounds like.
It's like, yeah, I mean they are, but it's interesting to know that you guys knew years ago who they were. It's like they were a lot bigger than I thought they were at the time.
Oh, I listen. I've been mentally putting together ARs for a while, and I have an old notebook, and it has the barrels, the barrel length, the type, and the price of the guns I was daydreaming about buying. And it's funny going through it and seeing the prices every now and again. Like, it was crazy. But yeah, I know Model 1.
So the AR is, I think we all have an intimate relationship with it, especially if we're old enough to be older than its popularity. That makes sense? Because we're not older than it. We're all older than its popularity. And I hate it. I'm like Tony. Everything I did, so Air Patrol, Scouts, every manual I looked at was all World War II, Korea, and Nam, except for a couple of the newest things, which were comic books. How could you take that seriously? Everything was wood and steel, and if Browning or Garand would have wanted you to screw with the gas system, there'd be a freaking knob on the gas system. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't need to be screwing with nothing. And if he needed you to be putting it together, then he would have sold it to you as 2 parts. I mean, like, guns were hammers and guns were things you went accessory or appliances. You bought them. You didn't make them. They weren't robots, right? We didn't have that modular concept. We didn't even have modular tools. We didn't have batteries that were swapping between power tools. Everything was its own thing, right? So the AR made out of aluminum and plastic and looking like a stupid ray gun or something, when all our guns were cool and we were going from bolt action to Garand to the M1 or the M1A1 or whatever, the M2, whatever the 308 thing that
M14. Yeah.
Right? That was the cool shit. That was the actual best thing you could possibly get. And it was unobtainium. And nobody used it. Nobody knew why. And there was no internet of recoil or any of that. I saw it on a piece of paper. Like everybody does with their guns today. Sees it on visual and you go, oh yeah, that's the shit right there. So AR, tiny little bullet. Okay, there's a lot of bullets. But what do you need bullets for? What are you going to shoot Kevlar deer or whatever? That's our mentality back in the day. This was new. So I had nothing to do with the AR. Plus, it didn't have a great reputation. You didn't go tune it up. Like, there wasn't armorers fixing it. It either worked or it didn't. And if it did, you sold it to the next sucker and you bought something that did work, right? And you bought a lever action or something. Like, there was just different options back then.
And also, zero popularity, really. And again,
never in a gun shop. They were hardly in gun shops. Even if there was, you look at it and never buy it.
That was the one sitting right there, that M16. What is it? AR-15 with the H bar, the Colt AR-15 H-bar with the optic on it. Yeah, that's set there. I looked at it, and then I went and looked at everything else, especially, again, surplus. Has a story. Has a soul.
Killed Nazis, for crying out loud. I could buy that gun. Killed a Nazi or garbage, plastic toy. No, I'll buy the real gun. So,
that nobody cared if they shot it or not.
Now, I did shoot them, and I did go to every familiarization I could ever do in Civil Air Patrol, which is closest we would get to, going on Air Force bases and doing stuff, or maybe going in, someplace else and hanging out with other branches. If you're in the training to be something in the military, they're going to try to get you as much experience as you can possibly get, right? So I've definitely shot it and played with it a little bit, but still had very little interest because it was a thing. It was a solid thing. There was no modularity. There was, except for taking the magazine in and out and changing the sling on it with a different sling that looked exactly like it. Actually, you'd take the sling off and put a leather sling on it. Now that I say that, there was a little thing you'd put like a cheek rest on the stock. So there was ways to soup it up. You could get leather like jackets to turn it white. Like there was things you could do to an AR, but it was basic that you could do to every gun back then. Put a bayonet on it, right? You could get an optic for it. So technically there was ways to soup it up and make it look cooler. And then when Punisher used them, I probably cared a minute about it. But then Punisher also had an HK. So I was like, okay, there's a gun I can't get. So yeah, for me, again, it was, I had experience with them to some extent, but still didn't like them. My one in basic in, well, it doesn't matter. So, but my thing in basic, you could stick a dime between the upper and lower. It was definitely some old, well-used thing. And you can become intimate with it. At least for us, it was clean it all the dang time. It was never dirty. You're just wiping it and touching it and cleaning it all the time. Get you intimately familiar with it. And now that I talk to people, a lot of people never had a gun before they went to some kind of basic orientation training in the military, right? And depending on your job or your role in the military, you're going to get more or less or more intense familiarization or operation of the firearms, but everybody gets some familiarization, and part of it is probably what Tony does with the 2A for E, the familiarization, and then orientation, and then if they want to, some time to pull triggers, but at their own pace and without a drill instructor, instead with introduction to the community, as well as the nomenclature and the terminology and the fun and the memes and all that. People become part of the culture, and then when they want to, they participate in the culture. So that was part of it, is to get people acclimatized. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for, with the whole idea of like, this is just a machine and you're going to be using a lot of them. You're going to be using a stapler and a mop bucket way more, but you're going to know how to use all of these things just as well. So take this thing completely apart and put it back together, because you're responsible for every little pin and part. And if an armorer says you lost something, you better know what to go look for in the yard, because you lost it and you're going to go find it, right? So there was some of that, and that didn't help nothing. I was like, this gun's sloppy and I don't like it. I shot okay with it, but like I was saying, we gamed basic. When we knew what was going on when we went in. So, and my goal was to shoot poorly enough to sit in the foxhole the longest, and then shoot expert at the end. Does that make sense? So I was playing with it so that I could still shoot it. So I was shooting like leaves and shooting branches. So I got to shoot the thing a little bit, and it was mine. Like I had the one. You guys had your own gun, right? The whole time through basic, or I don't know stuff. You guys do basic and straight into other school. I did mine different, but as long as they give you one, it's yours. So I made sure that it worked, and it worked. So I knew it was capable, but it was still like, well, like I say, we knew that the A2 existed, so we knew that something was changing, but the handguards went from triangle to round. Wow. Like from two different handguards to one handguard that's the same on both sides, so it's even lamer, right? And like 3-round trigger thing that everybody hated, so it's going to be lamer. So I was like, my experience with it after getting out of Army and stuff was like, okay, there it is. Stupid M16 still sucks. Like I know more about it. I know how to work it, right? But the magazines were like 30-round aluminum magazines. They're disposable. At least I learned that from having no big opinion of ARs, is that magazines are perishable, like cartridge cases. Yes, people reload them, but in war, I don't care about reloading my ammo. I care about getting another mag in the gun, and that's it. But my magazines are getting left behind, and my ammo's getting left behind. Afterwards, you clean up, and maybe you can reuse some stuff. But you know what I'm saying? Like that concept that a magazine is perishable and is garbage and it doesn't get picked up. comes from the AR-15 having a garbage aluminum mag that often was not useful after you stepped on it a bunch of times.
100%.
And then,
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it. The only thing cool AR-15 M16 was the Car 15s used by like SOG back in the, and you weren't getting one of those. You know what I mean? Like that was.
I never saw one except for in magazines ever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And
Yeah,
was adjacent to some interesting shit, and you never seen one.
and yeah, like you said, because that was interesting. That was run by guys who were doing cross-border raids or special ops dudes, and you never saw one. So why do I give a dang?
They didn't want them because they wanted H&K MP5s back then. They wanted FALs. They wanted the right arm of the free world and the little German 9mm burp guns. And that's what they got.
Yep.
They didn't want that AR-15 looking thing. A couple of dudes made AR-15s in Nam when they had no other choice, and they hobbled them together, and they existed in people's memories. But the dudes from Nam might have had theirs laying around, but the new dudes were like, I have no budget and I can buy anything. Let's not hacksaw an AR-15 up. And they definitely weren't worrying about, Big Army wasn't worrying about how do we make the AR smaller for everybody. So my experience was, see ya, I don't need the AR-15 anymore. So I went a couple of years of being a hippie and not worrying about that kind of stuff and just being happy with lever guns and revolvers and stuff. And then probably by the time I started playing with doing stuff online with guns, bringing guns online, I was like, I don't know, I just didn't feel right to, this was at the end of the assault weapons ban also. So, why would I not want to experience what an AR could do at the end of the assault weapons ban when they are unobtainable for 10 years or whatever? Even though I didn't want one, I didn't like the idea that I couldn't get one, right? So once they were obtainable, I didn't go out and get an AR. I bought an AK as soon as the assault weapons, well, actually before the assault weapons ban, but as soon as the assault weapons ban was over, Wassers, right? And we started building. Like, that was AK time. My friends were into ARs. So one thing is I didn't need to buy ARs because if you've ever watched anything we've ever done, we have amazing ARs, and those aren't mine. Those are friends, the other people on the team. So I didn't need to have vehicles when I got friends with Rolls Royces and Humvees, right? Like, what I'm saying? Like, so I was adjacent to awesome ARs. I could lean into AKs. And then the other problem is when you shoot or when you drive a Rolls Royce and a Humvee, you really don't want like a BMX bike. You know what I mean? Like, and that's all I got. So my AR experience is shooting luxury, nice ARs with really nice optics on them. So I appreciate that I've got a BCM with iron sights, and it's the claw hammer that'll do anything, right? It's the East Wing hammer that it's not fancy, but it'll do everything. So that's my experience with them. Is I've never really liked them. I appreciate what they can do, and I understand them, and I definitely understand their use. I don't hate them. I just don't need to buy one or have a bunch of them, and I have no interest in having a bunch of them. Like Clover, I probably built more than most people, just because if I'm going to be useful in a gun shop, it's not that difficult to put one together. And I would put them together and let them time them. So it's like I'm the guy who can tighten all the screws and then give it to the person who finishes it, right? The guys that were really gunsmiths or armorers. So I can do the easy work or make get 90% of it done for them. But then they figure out the dwell and which buffer to put in it and, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's been my experience with them. And I appreciate them probably now more that they're the same way I appreciate the Glock, in that they're the gold standard. Like the same, I'd say that the four things that exist are in this realm are the 1911, which started it all, the AR-15, which came next, the 1022, which came in like a knife that nobody expected, and then the Glock. And those four platforms have become the platforms that allowed all other third-party manufacturers to make accessories and stuff. And then once that infrastructure was created and everybody looked around, they made the environment possible for the CZs and the SIGs to exploit, and the Smith & Wessons to exploit that desire to have personalization and ergonomic endless possibility, or at least variation. Sure. And then those manufacturers provide, like, so as soon as those platforms existed, then the manufacturers could exist to satisfy all the options there. Once those options are available and that infrastructure exists, boom, the spectrum explodes. So I give it to AR-15 as being like the, the soil or the dirt or the trees or whatever that allowed the flowers to eventually get in place that we got today, like the variety and the nuance that we've got today. Not that I appreciate that any more than what we had before. I kind of liked it before. It was a lot easier to deal with it, but obviously it's fun to watch it all expand. So for me, I really dig that part of the AR-15. And I just showed the AR-15 buyer's guide project that I've done. I think how much depth there is because it's one of the main. Even though I don't personally shoot it all that much, I give it a lot of respect and I'm super interested. So yeah, anytime we want to have this conversation, I've kind of put it out there for the viewers to vote on when we should have it. But I'll try to dust some of my stuff off that I've done in the past, trying to scratch the surface of how big the realm is of AR-15s.
Huge.
All right. Well, with that, we went way over. Let's see. We've got well, and as soon as you start talking ARs, you get a billion questions, right? Daniel's trying to say Z's is the gold standard. I know. Is it a high power that they're all made off of? So would high power be the one? I think it's still Browning. I'm kind of thinking Browning has to still take credit. Yeah, there's definitely that now, but I don't think that could even that existed in race guns and competition guns for sure. But I don't think it could have existed in the big community without 1911s, basically.
Well, 1911s created the sports here and created that sport for the most part. CZ came along and is a mating of a Browning high power and a P10, Sig P226. That's the way I feel about it. It's a great gun. I love them. I mean, shoot, I got 3 of them. And I think it is great, but it's not the gold standard here. A lot of people don't even know what a CZ is. CZ handgun is in overall firearms owners in America.
Well, we're getting the thing. The vote out there is next week, near future, on the anniversary of the AR-15 or something like that, and then by far it's next week, and then it's near future coming in. So unless something comes up that I'm forgetting, unless you guys have something else going on, then I'll set it up for next week. We'll do the AR-15, and we'll just kind of reminisce about our experiences with it, and then just riff on specific AR questions. So if you want to send them in to that. For that, you can go to askgunquestions.com, the website. I'll put a link in here again. And then there's a little form there, or just bring them live and like people have been doing today, and we'll chat them up. But, well, we tried this, and we tried to put on the brakes at an hour, aimed at 90 minutes, and here we'll almost come to a break, a rest at an hour. So I'll do my best to help that by shutting up. Clover, you go first. Let us know if you got to throw anything out there. Last points that we've discussed today, anything about the future, and plug.
Not really. I've enjoyed the chat and looking forward to next week.
Right on. Well, thanks again as always. And I wanted to thank you again. I got the package from Wanamaker and really do appreciate it. Being part of the thing remotely. That's called is appreciated. So looking forward to being able to attend again. But yeah, very cool. Especially that one, passing of Joe. The memorial stuff is freaking neat. Really appreciate it. And well, I won't get into. I'll tell you off air. So then, Tony, same thing. Anything you want to wrap up from this show? Anything you want to kind of tease from that future one, or anything you want to plug? I know you've been doing some shoots.
Yeah, we just had a diversity shoot last week, and we have another one coming up on May 12th at the Heritage Guild in Eastern Pennsylvania. So I just made the tickets go live on Eventbrite today. If you want to follow me on Eventbrite, go to Eventbrite and follow Tony Simon. And every time there's a ticket goes on sale, you'll be alerted. I'll be talking and hopefully getting them to update my website in the next couple of 3 weeks. Because again, I'm working on funding to make sure I have money to get to Kevin Dixie's in St. Louis at the end of next month, Memorial Day weekend. So that's what I'm doing. You can support us by going to diversityshoot.com, donating there to PayPal, or you can follow us on Simon Says Train on Instagram, Simon Says Train on Facebook, and the Second is for Everyone on Facebook. Thanks a lot. Oh, yeah, and listen to the Second is for Everyone podcast, which I really have to do an episode. I've been taking notes all week for it.
Right on. Sorry about that. I was
Okay,
over
cool.
there, clicking on over there, making everybody hang. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys both jumping in. And when you were I think when you were describing BASIC, and maybe when I started saying it, made me think that, one of the things that, I forget, I think it was, I can't remember, something I was listening to this week. There was quite a bunch of good stuff this week. Something was talking about the military, and it made me think, because so many people think if you go to the military, you somehow are deemed with knowledge of everything they've ever heard of the military, which it can't be the truth, right? So the firearms and weapons and that kind of thing is definitely one. Like, nobody in the military, except for very few, knows how to work a tank. Come on, for crying out loud, or how to fly an airplane, right? So it's the same thing with handguns, and it's the same thing with body armor and night vision. If you need to use it, yeah, you know more than anybody, but you don't need to use it, then you've seen it just as much on movies and TV as everybody else, because you're not even near it, especially when the stuff costs thousands of dollars or whatever. So anyway, what you do get when you go to the military is immersed in culture of the United States. And I can remember the way that it works most of the time is if you go to a school or a thing, when you show up, it's sort of like the roll of the dice, a shuffle of the cards or whatever. And if they need 10 people there and people are showing up once every 2 days or once every week or once every whatever, that's how long you're going to be sitting there waiting for a class to accumulate. And then when people show up, they go, okay, next Monday, we got enough people, you're starting your cycle. And it'll happen like that all the time. Like, you can't even imagine how stupid maybe it's better now with computers and stuff. I don't know. But it used to be like that. And what would happen is sit around with go ahead.
No, you're right. It was dumb. You wait until they had enough people in the queue to start a class, and you can be sitting with your thumb up your butt for 2 weeks doing busy work.
Yeah, cleaning, sitting around or whatever. Maybe and here's what else. And I didn't even think about this. They'd be like, hey, you guys, we aren't doing nothing. Go over there and get a shot. Like, what? Yeah, they need to learn how to give shots, or like they got some new stuff in a shot and they want to see what happens when they stick it in somebody. So go over there. And you can't do nothing. You can run over there faster. I mean, nothing you could do. You can't even impress nobody. It's a horrible situation. It's like a limbo. Anyway, you also have nothing to do. And if you're good at it, you know what's coming. And this is another reason. Pro tip: go to Civil Air Patrol, be a cadet or something. Like, learn all that stuff before you actually get immersed in it. You can also just go hide behind a tree and then nobody knows you even exist, right? And then if you're, as long as you're there on the morning when they say we're counting how many people are here and you're there, then that's what matters, right? So it's one of those kind of things. And once everybody figures that out, you sit around eating popsicles behind a tree and bullshitting about what's going on in the world. And you figure out, I call it a hoagie, I call it a grinder, I call it a submarine sandwich, right? And that's what you get out of the military. And I think a lot of people don't get that. And I imagine you could probably get that from other things, motorcycle club, being in a band, touring with a band. Like, I don't know, like there's got to be other things in the culture that give you that. But I know that that's one of the things that unites us about being in the military is you get out and you know a lot about the country that you never knew about before, because you're going to learn a lot about stuff when there's 13 of you cleaning freaking shower with a toothbrush. It's stupid thing for 2 hours, right?
It is. I mean, I guess in some respects, some people go to college and get that, but many people don't leave far from home. So when you're me, for instance, and you find yourself, in a benjo ditch in Iwakuni, Japan, clipping weeds, yeah, you become tight with the dude who's next to you clipping weeds in the benjo ditch. And you end up flying to Austin and hanging out with him and his family, And you never thought you'd end up in Austin, Texas, but here I am at 5 Points. That's what happens if you take advantage of it.
And there's a method to that madness. And now that I've been listening to a lot more of these military podcasts and hearing stuff from the officer side, like literally there is some method to some of this, because then let's say you become intimately familiar with whoever it is you're plucking dandelions on your knees with for 2 weeks while you wait for that class. You go to that class, guess who excels in that class? Because you know each other pretty much intimately. Yep. And you're also, now you're 7 years later and you need to know that skill. And you're like, Benny always did this left-handed, I do it right-handed, and you do it right-handed and you save the day. You know what I'm saying? Like there's reasons for some of that. And anyway, what I was getting at is that accumulation or familiarization is what you're offering with the 2A for E. Except people aren't, well, people volunteered for everything we did too, I guess. I was gonna say, except people are volunteering for it. But yeah, they're like, I imagine it had to happen when you watch like Biloxi Blues and Full Metal Jacket, when people got drafted. It happened, period, because so many people got drafted and then you got nothing else to do. It's going to happen. But when we all volunteered, it was all on a whole nother level, because it's like, you could have done what and you did this, you were doing what and you did this, like what and what, I signed up for what and I could have signed up for what. And I mean, like, that's a whole, is it camaraderie? I don't know what to call it, like family.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Really
It's camaraderie. It's a fellowship.
It's fellowship. Yeah, you're not going to necessarily be with those people forever, and you know it, but you've got the same journey. You came with the same reasons, and gun ownership is similar. You decided to do it. There's fundamental reasons. It's not like, I think that's for some people, it might be frivolous, but I doubt the people that are showing up to 2A for E are like, I got nothing else to do on Thursday. And even if they are, they're experiencing some wholesome, authentic experience, like immersion, right? But for the people that are like, I feel there's something about guns and I'm not getting it at my local gun shop, or I just don't know how to ask, or at the gun show, because there aren't any gun shows, or at the shooting range, right? They don't know how to ask. That gives them that opportunity, but it's also, I can imagine the reason you keep doing this is you're getting some fulfillment out of that as well, getting this experience from multiple ones, all the different variety and versions of gun owner comes along.
It is amazing, especially now that I'm doing them every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm meeting people from all across this area, and then of course being Jersey, New York, Philadelphia area, you're meeting people from all across the planet, because people come from, it's a higher dense population density and sectional workforce and everything else. So you're getting tons of people from different backgrounds showing up with different reasons, but we're all here for the same reason, which is our civil rights and the promotion of it and the use of it. So this last event, we had a group who I'd only worked with once before, and I'd only heard of a month earlier, called New Jersey Sharpshooters, which is a group of people that are just into shooting. They're a little more tactical, Timmy. Like, everyone showed up with a war belt, drop leg holster, and they were our RSOs and our volunteers, and they had on what do you call them? Plate carriers and stuff like that with their names on them. It was really cool. It was really organized, but it was just another group of firearms people that are there for a different reason. Like, they're attracted to the tactical thing, and they were talking about that. And now all of a sudden I got soccer moms shooting CZ SP01s and asking how much were they, and was really impressed. And that's going to be her first gun, because that's the first gun she tried out at our event. She shot it well. Her son shot it well. And she was like, take a picture of it, write that name down. I'm going to look into that because I got my permit. How cool is that? I mean, you can't get cooler than that.
Because think about who made the CZ? The Czechoslovakians? Were they Nazis when they made that, or were they communists when they made that?
It's communist, 1975.
Okay, so when the commies made it's a 380, I think, right? Or equivalent of I think it's 380, right?
No, it's 9 mil.
No, the real Scorpion, the little.
Yeah, the 32 ACP.
Oh, it's 32 ACP. So it's a little tiny gun. It was made for ladies and for like people on bicycles or people tightrope walking, or I don't know what they made this little tiny little machine gun for, right? But back in the communist days, it would have been like, hey, Madam Comrade, or whatever they called ladies. Like, I'm not a biologist, so I don't know what communists call ladies. What do you call it? Take this little 32 ACP zip gun, little tiny machine gun, and carry it. And it must have been effective or necessary or needed to some extent. Communists made them do it, except that now instead of somebody making them do it, it's like, here's an option. What would you like? A little tiny gun that fits in your hand. You got to hold the whole recoil in your hand, and then the operation of the thing is dependent on your ability to push against that recoil, right? You have to have a good shooting stance. If you're not with enough body weight or grip strength to just accomplish that with your wrist, right? You got to have a decent shooting stance and know that whole thing, and have the awareness to do all that at a time of stress, you know, with the semi-auto, or have something you can hold in two hands. It's almost impossible to take from you. Nowadays, there's light options, so you can have a illumination mounted to it, if not a laser to be ultra precise from shooting from a hip or in distress or something, or from a, you know, an adverse angle, and then have something with a shoulder stock on it as well, or a brace, and then have that as an option. We live in 2022, where a lady or anybody can go to a gun shop and decide, you know what, a handgun isn't for me, but that little 9mm carbine is. She can buy that thing and use that the same way that the communists would have forced on it. Grandma, maybe.
Sure. I mean, we are in the golden age, man. People give different things to go. This is the golden age, dude. You could build it yourself, like with 3D printing. With 80%, I mean, this, like, within, what is it? Didn't Rob Pincus just do a build in 30 minutes, 3D print it this week?
I think it was something like so what if you can print it in 3D in 30 minutes, right? Like, yeah, it can be done, but so what, right? That's not the point.
Yeah, no, it was, I was just talking about the freedom that we've never, you know, it took longer than that to build anything before. And now we're to the point, yeah. It's kind of making a lot of this.
Than that to go to drive to the store to get the parts ordered back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you're not building anything in 30 minutes. I mean, you're not getting a firearm in 30 minutes in Jersey, no matter what. But you can build it across the river.
So to wrap it up and try to go full circle, I'm going to kill this. And then since Tony brought up 3D printing, I'm going to go back to 3D printing firearms is cool. But next level of 3D printing is 3D printing firearms museums. So the other day I printed the J.M. Davis Firearms Museum, the entranceway to the museum, and accidentally figured out a way to, I knew this was a thing. I didn't do this intentionally, but it definitely works where the letters in the banner there come through when there's light behind it. And then the 45th Infantry Division Museum in Oklahoma City. So both of these are Oklahoma museums, by the way, about 2 hours from each other. But this is my new project to series, I guess, would be not to just 3D print guns, but how about we 3D print a museum with 6,000 guns from a private collection on display, or the 45th Infantry Division Museum, a place with almost 1,000 guns on display from a private collection that are organized in the different campaigns that our military has dealt with from the beginning.
6,000? Did they get rid of a bunch?
They have 12,000, but 6,000 on display, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
But no, that's great. So, but anyway, so that's just to play with these again and to wrap it up. Thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks to Clover and Tony and Dan when he comes along for our continued effort, their time to try to get rid of this. Turn this off and be able to say with these guys back on the screen again. Thanks for spending your time with us to give us experience. And thanks to the people that ask questions and people that show up live to be part of it. And we'll be back to pick you up later. GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.
Thank you for supporting our projects. If you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee, check out our Patreon channel.
The guys and gals at GunWebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thank you for watching GunWebsites.com.
Oh, before I end it, I guess I should jump back over here and show you that only G23 participated in the Ask Gun questions today, so it won't let me draw. So thanks, G23. His show is up next. And next time, maybe pay attention to the scrolls at the bottom of people's screens.